that connection, almost like a spiritual connection. So many people write in and say, this is my favorite thing to do on the weekends. It's so meditative, or this is the best purchase I've made. And I do this with my kids all the time. So there's such an experiential component, but I made the decision, I had to really focus on one side or the other and not both. And I really thought, one farm stand, one heart, because I want the ability not just to be providing food, but really to, nurture, the mindset and the experience. Hi, I'm Jacob Pechenik, founder and CEO of Let Us Grow. And today I'm going to talk about how easy it can be to grow your own food at home, to refine the wonder in nature, and to participate in creating a new food system that will be better for ourselves, for our communities, and for the planet.
3, 2, 1.
So conscious consumerism.
Yeah.
That's a term that I'm somewhat familiar with, and I think is becoming even more common for people when they're making choices and what they want to put into their bodies, and realizing more and more in where they put their money that they actually have a choice. Can you shine a light on that topic for us a little bit more? And
sure.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I think about it when it comes to food, and I was really woken up to it when I learned I was going to be a dad, and was just looking at the food we were eating. I wanted to have a perfectly normal, healthy baby. And I saw ingredients and, just strange, long ingredients and lots of things. And I saw GMOs and things, and I didn't really know what GMOs were. I asked everyone I knew. Not a single person knew what GMOs.
Is GMO bad? Is this?
Yeah.
What is this?
And I'm not saying whether that it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying people don't know what it is. And so who's making the decision for people that it is good or bad? Is it the government? And do you want to trust the government to make that decision? And I remember going to a restaurant, I think it was to celebrate something. And I saw this on the menu. It was like a $40 chicken dish. And I was wondering, God, what kind of chicken is this?
Is it like all the chickens?
Yeah. And so I asked the server, and this was like the nicest restaurant in this area, and asked the server, where's the chicken come from? And she's like, I'm not sure, I'll be back in a minute. And it took probably 5 minutes or more. She comes back. She's like, I couldn't find out the name of the farm, but it comes in a white truck with red letters, and it's really good. And you start to think even the nice restaurants and, top chefs are essentially curating our food for us, and they're picking the ingredients, and they don't even know, it doesn't matter enough, to them. And I think just overall people have become so disconnected from what's in their food, where it came from. We used to, I think, we had this inheritance that came from our great-great-grandparents to our grandparents, that was passed down. It was things like how to grow food, but also what to eat when your stomach hurts, or what to, what to have when you have a fever, or what should be on the plate. And now I think, we're so removed from that. We have to, we're always consulting different diets and, really trying to rebuild this, this sort of information that used to be there.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than conscious consumerism, but I think it's a big trend in that we're essentially just so far, removed.
Yeah. We have gotten so far removed, I think, in the food choices we make. But when I think about it, for me, it's very simple. And I think nutrition and food really is simple. I grew up eating most of the foods that we grew. I grew up on a large plot of land in the middle of nowhere with my grandparents, and they had massive gardens, vegetables, fruit, gourds. There was the other side of the mountain. There was a farm that had beef and livestock, and we would kind of trade and get protein sources that way and give the vegetables and fruits to them. And I remember it being so much more about the food as well. I mean, the food quality was incredible. It tasted so good. Everything was in season, was so fresh. But there was also something to the fact of literally getting my hands dirty as a kid and playing, being taught valuable lessons from my grandparents about, you know, the right time of year to put this seed here, and like the care and everything that it takes to take care of yourself and provide. That's kind of what you're doing here in bringing this aspect back home for a lot of people as well, right? It's the quality, but like the care that goes into the process. That
connection, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm confident it's in our DNA, right? To have a connection with the land and to have it with food that we grow. I mean, up until, 200 years ago, we all grew our own food. And 100 years ago, it was 70% of us growing our own food. And now, I think less than 2% of the country, is involved in agriculture. But I see my kids interact with our gardens, and I see kids interact with any garden, and it's just this curiosity, and there's this desire, right, to get your hands dirty and to learn more. And they eat anything, almost anything that they grow. There's a much better connection. Maybe some of the worms.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. But, when I started this journey, it was when I was becoming a dad, and I just went down this rabbit hole. It's like, who knows, the answers to these questions, and why is a bunch of spinach cost more than a Big Mac? That it just didn't make sense to me. And I didn't really know where to start. So I just started with starting a farm. And I met two other guys that they knew how to farm. They had built something in their backyard. It was really impressive. And I came along and I said, they wanted to do something much bigger. And I became a partner and ended up running the farm. And, through that experience, I learned, a ton about farming. But there was like two surprising things, that really stood out. And one was, this was a farm in Austin, Texas. It was like not even 15 minutes from downtown. And it was hard to get people to come out to the farm. They would sometimes cancel, or take a while, but then they'd come out. And they'd end up, canceling all their other meetings and staying for 2 hours. Yeah. And they'd come back on the weekend with their kids, and they'd want to figure out how to volunteer on the farm. And I just remember, walking the fields, and when we had our first harvest, pulling a turnip out of the ground and wiping, the dirt on my jeans and just eating it, mostly turnip, a little bit of dirt. And it was the best thing I think I've ever eaten, and just that feeling that I had. And that moment, it was really like, how do I give this feeling to as many people as possible? And Austin was pretty easy to get someone to the farm. LA, if you want to go to a farm, it's like, 2.5 hours, each way. That was, impossible. So I really started thinking a lot about, okay, how do I get people on farms? And that ended up really shifting to, okay, how do I bring the farm to the people? And that was the genesis of Let Us Grow. The other thing that I found on the farm is that as hard as, growing an organic, head of like leafy greens is, the more challenging thing was like sales, marketing, and distribution. It was getting this like beautiful, picture perfect, tasty, nutritious head of lettuce.
It's so asinine when you think about it.
Yeah. And we had to then...
It should sell itself,
Yeah. It was easy taking it to farmers markets. It was a little bit harder taking it to chefs, because they all had their own schedule they wanted to receive. But when we went to go to grocery stores, we had to put that in a plastic clamshell or a plastic bag, then into a box, then onto a truck that went to a distribution center, that then would go onto another truck that would go to the grocery store, which then someone has to drive and go get it. And it could be 10 days old, The average piece of produce travels over 1,500 miles, and it's roughly like, I think, 10 days old before anyone eats it. And I didn't really know this, but at the time, the nutrient loss is profound along the way. A lot of varieties lose about 30% of their nutritional content within 3 days of harvest, but things like spinach could lose 50% in 24 hours. And a lot of the GMOs, now I've learned, have been designed to keep, they call it life support, to keep the produce looking kind of alive, after it's been harvested for this long journey. But in the end, it's something like 50% of produce is wasted before anyone eats it.
Because really well.
Yeah. And so it's wasted on the journey, it's wasted at the grocery store, or it's wasted in your fridge, because you've gotten something that's already 10 days old and then it goes bad. And so, and it's kind of floppy and, doesn't taste as great. So it was really, I realized this is like a huge disservice to the people, right? To the consumers. It was a disservice to us because as a farmer, we weren't getting paid as much because we were only kind of getting paid what the grocery store was going to sell. And then it was a huge disservice to the environment because you put all these resources into growing and then transporting produce, and half is wasted. So that's where, the thought of, could we rethink fresh food distribution so that we never kill the plant, that it's always alive until you're ready to eat? And if we do that, we could eliminate that 50% waste, which would cut the price of fresh produce in half.
Damn.
And then along the way, get a whole bunch of other benefits, which we see by minimizing, by helping customers, finish growing at home. So the essential idea is, let's grow baby plants for 3 weeks. And we do that because, growing, almost everyone's scared. Oh, I don't have a green thumb, I can't grow. So it's kind of hard if you haven't done it.
Sure,
like if you grew up on a farm, so it's probably not as tricky for you, but people don't know what varieties to grow, when to do that, like how far down to push the seed, right? How much to water. They're like watering and then nothing happens, then water more. And then they're like, oh, I did too much. And
so much care needed.
Yeah. So we have a network of farms where we can put that expert care into the babies. And once they're like 2 or 3 weeks old and they're looking healthy, like they're pretty much good to go. So we then put them in a box, a very small box, because they're small baby seedlings, send them to our customers, who then finish growing them on site until they're ready to eat.
It's like the perfect handoff there. So many things in there to kind of unpack that I think deserve equal attention. But I'm curious, what have you seen really grab the attention most from the consumer? Are you finding when you're informing people about how much, half of this produce, in fact, that is going to waste, is it the waste that is getting people's attention? Is it the actual ease of being able to grow these foods at home? Is it the cost? Because so many of these components here are equally important, but not everybody cares equally when it comes to making these decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what have you seen really latch on for the consumer?
That's a great question, because I want to know the answer to that too. Because
I'm still waiting on the analytics.
Yeah, it gets tough, marketing this, because it's a very innovative. We call it distributed farming, where you're really part of this network where we start, you finish, but we're with you the whole way. And we have horticulturists and a big customer care team that's always always there to help. So you can take pictures of plants. If you think something's wrong, we'll tell you exactly what to do. But we always want to know exactly like what are the concerns people have, or what are the drivers. And in the last survey, we asked a bunch of questions, like really what what motivated you, right, to do this? And is it learning how to grow?
Yeah, farming at home.
Exactly. Was it learning how to grow your own food? Was it, access to more tasty, nutritious produce, the environmental impact, knowing where my food comes from?
And you all satisfy all of that.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. But the number one answer, do you want to guess?
With those options, I would say knowing where my food comes from.
You're right.
Ooh,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And that was like just ahead of the tasty, nutritious food. And then everything, was below, and learning how to grow was at the bottom. So I think it's like people don't really want to learn how to grow, but they want to almost learn, or have access. So we sort of like let you grow and pretend that you're a grower, if you want. But it's knowing where my food comes from. And I think that goes back to, how we started, which was, there is this desire for people to be reconnected. And I think a lot of that is not just the knowledge, but empowerment, because I think people, when I asked the question about where the chicken came from, nobody else had asked that question, and why not? Everyone's eating. And so why don't they want to know where it comes from? And
or they maybe don't want to know.
Or they don't. Yeah. But a lot of people just don't feel qualified to ask the question. So when we help people grow produce at home without pesticides, herbicides, anything else, and they feel so proud of it, and they kind of get a sense of what goes into it, and then they go to the restaurant or the grocery store, they feel a little bit more qualified, right, to ask that question. I grew mine this way.
At home, I'm curious. It might be maybe too qualified to spark up a conversation. I'm sure the waiter is probably like, sir, just shut up, eat your salad.
Yeah.
What about your original mission, though? Well, your original mission, my understanding, was to kind of really become more empowered and informed about the food stuffs that you were giving your children, being a new father, which I think is a common catalyst for a lot of people in life. When you become responsible for another human being, when you get married, or you have this major life event and you realize like, oh, I'm caring a little bit more about these other people in my life. Mm-hmm. Have you been able to satisfy that original mission of knowing where the food is coming from, you're feeding your children, the quality of it? Or did you kind of open up a can of worms that you don't really fully like everything you found inside?
It's probably more the latter. Mm-hmm. I know I've learned so much about food and, where it comes from, how it was grown or raised. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that there's a huge industrialized food system, and it's probably behind like 99% of the food, that we're eating, or at least if you're eating meats. Mm-hmm. That's just hard to unknow. But the big thing for me is I want to shift that, from more away from industrialized to more localized to more, family farmed or or growing yourself. But to be honest, my expectations aren't really that people are going to grow more than 10 or 20% of their own food at home, but they're really going to gain this huge appreciation for the other 80% that they're not growing at home.
It's like the 80-20 rule.
And they're going to want to go to the farmer's market for that, because they have because they have great tasting, great chemical-free, produce on one hand, and then they don't really know what's on it in the grocery store. So they go to the farmer's market, they ask questions. And then I think the more those questions are asked, then the more the food system will reconfigure to consumer demand. Yeah. The consumer's just been too silent.
Yeah, we have.
So that's really what I think is just empowering. Really, we've can have almost 50,000 little farmers that we've created.
Amazing! Wow,
so,
that's huge.
And farmers are more like the caretakers, of the earth and also of their families. And so I think just by shifting all these mindsets, we can make a big shift in to how people vote with their dollars. And I don't know all the right answers, but I think that collectively, if people are engaged, that we'll figure it out. And it's not rocket science. I mean, it was the science before, the first science.
True. Very true. Yeah. It makes me think of, I was sharing with you earlier, kind of the core of the show really came from health and wellness. And I still talk a lot here on the show about things that we eat, things that we do to make us feel, look, perform, be our best. And you can go a long time in your life thinking that you're good, thinking, oh, this is just how I'm supposed to feel, or this is how strong I'm supposed to be, or my body composition. But then when you make a choice to test it, to measure it, to change it, to optimize it, and once you know how good feels, you can't unknow that. And the same thing is so true when it comes to food. The food that I used to eat, that I used to grow, the food that I eat now from certain grocery stores, organic, conventional, certain restaurants, like if you just think long enough to pay attention, you absolutely can tell the difference. You can tell the difference in food quality. And if you can't, then you probably just have been eating a lot of poor quality, sub-quality foods long enough that, this really what I'm trying to get at is just like this is, I think, an awakening in nutrition that people don't know that they're going to have. And once you taste quality food, especially vegetables, you're going to be able to take that palate to the farmer's market, to the grocery store, to anywhere you go, and just make that small choice that's going to be a little bit more different. That's going to be huge for your health and wellness.
100% agree. And it's like in my whole dietary preferences and desires have changed. I used to have cravings for maybe what I'd call unhealthy things.
Your cravings have shifted.
Yeah. I mean, really my craving is I want a salad with, 10 different colors on it. That's like, that feels, really good to me. I think a lot of it is is helping people make that shift. Is that good tasting veggies have to be available, right?
And affordable.
Exactly. And they have to taste good. And if you grow, your own food, or you're picking it up at the farmer's market, you could put it in a salad and not need salad dressing because it tastes so good. Or we grow like 200 different things, but my favorite is wasabi arugula.
Oh yeah.
And I have to warn people before tasting it. I mean, I like hot things, but if you don't really like hot things and you have it, it tastes like you have a mouthful of wasabi. And people think, oh, is this GMO, or did you engineer this? Like, no, it's nature, but it's fresh, and it has nothing to do with us. It's just, that's, if you actually just, pick the arugula and eat it, that's what it tastes like. And so the more access that we have to that, I think then the more you're going to see like the menu items change, because right now, if you look at like the typical plate, it's like 2/3 a big piece of like one thing, meat. And then it's like, and a little, a little thing, a little dab of a little veggies and, something else. And when I look at that plate, I think like, I want to get as much variety as possible. And, you also think about like supplements and different things. Like you only need like a tiny little bit of certain things, right, to make a big difference. And so I think you probably don't need this like massive piece of meat. Maybe you can make that a little smaller and then have much more variety in your diet. I heard that the average American diet, that 95% of it comes from 13 different, food items.
It's not a lot.
It's not a lot. And then I was in Peru recently, and I think they had cultivated like 800 different types of potatoes. So it's like, we have just such a narrow spectrum of food, and that's like, no wonder we're, nutrient deficient and, not really living our best lives unless you really go out of your way, right, to find the farmer's market or the, best grocery stores. And then that stuff's really, it could be really expensive and inaccessible for a lot of people.
So we've been talking mostly about kind of like the consumer side. I'm curious. Actually, I know we've got Tatum here. Actually, in a restaurant that she's at, they use it there, and that kind of sparked my curiosity about having something like this in the places that we go to eat versus having it at home to create and grow what we eat there. Do you see any different or unique barriers to entry? Because I think getting it in establishments that are serving food, that are basically making the choice for us of fresh, farm to table, grown here. Therefore, maybe the consumer doesn't need to think about it or ask about it, but they're still getting that quality. What's unique? What's a barrier to entry in the restaurant space that you've found or you're predicting to get something like this in there for people?
Yeah. When we started, we were very much focused on restaurants, hospitality, hotels, and we had a lot of units out there. And then we went into the residential space. Okay. And it was two very different businesses. So from, the operating side, very different. And, the restaurants are still, as much as they, well, not all of them, but, some of them are very, want quality, of course, but it's still efficiency, volume, and bottom line, so, whereas consumers, right, have different, different needs, just like the knowing where my food comes from in that, that connection, almost like a spiritual connection. So many people write in and say, this is my, my favorite thing to do on the weekends. It's so meditative, or this is the best purchase I've made. And I do this with my kids all the time. So there's such an experiential component, but I made the decision, I had to really focus on one side or the other and not both. And I really thought, one farm stand, one heart, because I want the ability not just to be providing food, but really to, nurture, the mindset and the experience. And so, we could put 60 farm stands on the roof of a building or put it in the back of the restaurant or in the front, but it's not having that. It still does a lot of positive, but it's not also connecting with people, because this broader mission is really giving people that feeling that I had when I, pulled the turnip out of the ground, and empowering them. And
do you think the consumer might, them. Sorry to cut you off there, but just maybe think about, you said in the front of a restaurant. If I'm walking in the front of a restaurant and I may be seeing the chef or the kitchen staff like pluck the fresh vegetables that I just ordered.
That's super cool.
That makes me feel connected.
Yeah. There's a restaurant in Houston that has 10 of them, and they actually will go make a Caesar salad like at the, at the farm stand.
I'll have to get the name of that spot. My brother lives in Houston. I'm going to visit him in a few weeks to check that out.
Yeah, I'll get it for you.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I think it's great. I want to get as much exposure as possible, and for people to look at space in a different way. We have so much sidewalks, or let's say not even sidewalks, just unused space. And then we have all these lawns that, right now there's they've cut out the lawn watering, but people are like watering these lawns and they're not eating the lawns. There's no, there's not this other benefit. So to look at space in a different way and say, we're already putting all this resource into it. We have the sun right here. We can be growing, so much. So I think restaurants and other establishments like workplaces, right? All of these are great places to put food, and to put, growing and to show all these different ways that it could be done.
Do you think, is this a necessary start to the food supply chain problem, the food quality problem, the nutrient density problem? Is this enough? Is this a lead domino? Do you think, is this going to really be enough change to affect the bigger picture here we're talking about?
Yeah. Well, when I, started the farm, and and was learning more and more about food, I was really overwhelmed by all the problems.
Imagine, yeah.
Food deserts, the food miles, the chemicals, the subsidies, and so many different things. And was like, how do you tackle all of this? And that's where Let Us Grow's parent company is called the Farm Project. And that's why it's different than Let Us Grow, because we really want to, tackle
after the big
a lot of this. But, and there's so many different ways to do it, right? You can set up nonprofits and to help give access, lobby, for different policy or subsidies. But my focus was, and it was at the time when like Uber and Lyft were really, become ubiquitous. Mm-hmm. And it's like, gosh, 7 years ago, these did not exist. You had to go out and hail a cab or figure out something. And now that it's standard, and it was only 7 years from nothing to like what I thought was ubiquitous. I'm like, it was all because consumers wanted it. It was just easy enough because the consumers are still consumers and they want better, faster, cheaper. And so my focus became, I am just solely going to focus on the consumer and on their mindset. And if I can wake up a bunch of consumers and get them engaged, they're going to demand all of the things, and that all the big companies and all the, everything else will adapt to consumer demand. And so that's really just my sole focus, is just creating 1 million farmers, in the country and giving them access to like bite-sized information or more if they want it, but just make it an easy on-ramp so that they can discover more, and then hope that they're going to be, feel empowered and go out there and voice what they want. And I think in 7 years, why not? Why can't the whole food system reconfigure once we have that? And it's using the power of everyone and not just me or a bunch of nonprofits or, lobbyists. So
coming from your background, being a very creative person, developing a lot of things, this is not your first venture. How has this kind of stimulated the creator in you, the creative in you? Are you seeing this as a long-term opportunity, a long-term thing you're focusing on? Are you seeing that this is sparking a new idea, a stepping stone into something else in kind of farming or consumerism? I'm just curious in kind of like the entrepreneur in you, the creator in you.
I mean, this is such a big idea, and I've done a number of different things. But this one, my whole, heart's in it. And so all my creativity, I think, is in the business. I mean, part of what I, as an individual, I'm trying to also reclaim my own identity sometimes and take some of the creativity and diversify a little. But I'm, fully vested in Let Us Grow and in helping that, consumer on the journey, because growing food at home is just the beginning, right? And I never started it to help people grow food. It was to eat and to deliver that nutrition in a more efficient way and more accessible way. So then it becomes, what do I do with Swiss chard, And, we donate so much produce too. And you'll see people maybe like not taking the Swiss chard because they're like, what is that? So then you need to start educating, right? What do I do with Swiss chard? How can I make that into a meal in 5 minutes or 10 minutes that, kids are going to like? What are other things that you can do to minimize waste, at home? So I think that's really an opening for a whole world of areas and a world of areas to be creative in. And I find it's like hard to have that much, energy for creativity outside that, but I'm trying. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big endeavor. It's an admirable one as well. What would you pass on to a new owner of this? Someone who's made the choice, like, I want to grow my food at home. I want to get started. what's maybe a surprise they might not be ready for? What can they expect to kind of like experience quite literally growing the process, but in themselves as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I mention it now, it wouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah, a little spoiler alert.
Okay. I think
cool
people
experience.
start thinking like, oh, ROI, when it's pricey, it's an investment, it's going to be some time, and, how much is going to grow. And one thing they're surprised, like it's massive, the amount of food that comes out. We have a modular system. The biggest one is 36 plants, but it feed a family of 4 and creates the same yield as 45 square feet of raised beds. And that's partially because we've grown the plants for the first half of their lives. So in 3 weeks, they get really big. So
most of the hard work, at least the hard beginning stuff, is done for you.
We've done the hard work. And so with that 36 plant system, you could have a full harvest every day. So a full, head of lettuce or bok choy or, some leafy greens and some vegetables and some herbs.
It's like going to the market every day for yourself.
Yeah, I have 2 at my house, and I'm always putting out big boxes of produce in the front, to the neighborhood. But I think it's just the connection. Some people go and look at their plants every day. I would almost say it's like having a puppy, that's been potty trained already.
I'm doing that now with
mushrooms.
I'm growing lion's mane at home, and it's budding now. It's growing.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast
I named
it grows.
I water it. I talk to it. I check in on it. I'll share it with the team. I was like, check it out. It's cool. You develop a relationship with this thing you're growing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're looking, you get to know it. And then, if you're growing outside, then it's in this whole ecosystem too. And, generally, if you feed your plants, correctly and we tell you how to do that, they're very pest resistant, but it's still in nature. And so people will get, let's say, caterpillars, and they'll say, what do we do? And then we say, well, you could do nothing. You could flick them off. You could use this
escort them back
organic treatment called BT. So you could do different things. And then people will end up like taking a selfie with them and the caterpillar and posting it on the community group. It's it's just like they're getting really
connected to life.
They're getting connected and seeing how, and it's starting to look at things with wonder, wow, look at that. And you could pull the plants and see the roots and back to the Swiss chard, when we're growing rainbow chard, the roots are rainbow. They're all different colors, which is pretty cool. But it's almost like becoming a little kid again and really just seeing like the wonder of life and nature. And I don't know how to put words to it. And I didn't know when I started the company, I didn't know how to put that in the business plan. So it was all about the metrics, all about the waste and the water and the energy.
Which are important, especially with the endeavor you've
definitely. But the biggest thing is like that heart connection, and that's like really hard to describe.
It's what do they say, ineffable experiences. But once you kind of go through it, you just tell somebody, I got one too, I went through this similar thing, and you just know you have like another immediate connection too. So that's another aspect. You've got these people growing these things at home, they have these experiences in connection to their food, to their family, their plants, their caterpillars. And then you can, now immediately connect with another human being. So it's just an immediate connection in a way that I see just kind of stemming out in a lot of different ways.
I mean, food connects us all, every birthday party or, holiday, right? It's all around a meal, and being also able to provide part of that meal that you actually
that's the best.
Grew yourself. There's such a sense of pride in that. And that's like, we all need pride, right? We all need to feel that empowerment. And I think that helps in every other aspect of life.
I can't wait to have people over for dinner and I cook them my lion's mane.
Yeah.
Serve them my lion's mane mushroom that I grew. plenty to go around.
Did you get a kit or how did you?
Yeah, small hold.
Small hold. Yeah, I agree with the exact. I love small hold.
Yeah, it's a lion's mane kit, and I took a poll on Instagram. I was like, help me name my mushroom, and I got some really good ones. Second runner up, or first runner up, I guess, was Simba. I thought it was pretty funny. But I'm a huge Wolverine fan, Hugh Jackman, so I went with Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman is his name.
Love it.
Which is, I think, small hold. Actually, I had Andrew Carter on the show like 2 weeks ago, and I told him, I was like, I love how you give "Hi, my name is" sticker on the kit, and it immediately, like, I didn't even think anything of it. I was like, that's weird. Why would I name my mushroom? I immediately thought, oh, cool. I'm connected more to this thing that I'm involved with on a daily basis for the next 2 weeks. It's that same connection aspect, which, I hear you guys doing at Let Us Grow as well.
Yeah.
The more connection we can have in the things that we're doing, the thoughts that we're having, the people that we're with, that is something that is just going to provide ROI after ROI in ineffable and unmeasurable ways, I think.
It's like those Visa commercials or MasterCard. It's like the cost. It's like the old ones, and then at the end, it's priceless. Like priceless. So exactly. True. So,
well, it's been so good having you on the show. Thank you so much for kind of highlighting a concept that I enjoy revisiting, because it's one that I think myself and a lot of people just take for granted. We go to the farmer's market, we go to the grocery store, we go to the restaurant, and we don't think about what am I eating, or where did this food come from? Can I even have a choice in what I'm putting into my body beyond what's on the menu? I can say yes, I can say no, or I can go home and grow it my own. So I think it's a really cool reminder of the choice that we have in life, and such a great choice to have. I don't think there's a bigger choice than the food we put into our body.
No, it nurtures us. Yeah. I think it's important to also think, we need to be empowered to have that choice. But if you also think about who's currently making the choices now and how are they rewarded and incentivized, and they're generally not, rewarded for my nutrition, and my health. And it's just the way our system works. They're rewarded for profitability and, cost reductions. And so I think we need to just change that whole, paradigm, and waking up consumers is a good way to do that.
Well, I have one final question for you to kind of bring it home to the concept of the show, to live a life ever forward. You've highlighted some really cool things that we can do to become more empowered and have more choice over our life, our wellness, so that we can move forward in life. When you hear those two words, what does that mean to you here today? How do you live a life ever forward?
For me, I think it means being limitless, not seeing anything that can hold me back from going forward. So even where, you might see a wall, that wall doesn't really exist. There's new ways to rethink and reimagine things. There's new, seeing obstacles aren't really obstacles. They're just helping you, find your flow, right, somewhere else. So I think you are ever forward, and you have to stay in that flow and that momentum, and not really see or acknowledge the barriers, to preventing that progression.
I like that. Choose limitlessness. Say that 5 times fast, but if you make that choice. I
think I made up that word, and that's part of being limitless, having limitlessness. You can make up words.
Well, thank you so much.